Okay, this video is in response to this hat that I made that's in one of my profile pictures on Facebook, and I believe I have it posted on my Facebook page at Simply Intertwined. It doesn't look like much now, but I'm going to put it on just so you can see it. And I have to look at it for a minute because you'll know why I'm looking at it when I show you how you make it. Okay. Of course, this isn't the best to try looking at. See how it is. But this is what it is. It's like a little slouchy hat. Okay. And people are wondering how I made this. Pretty simple. So, get yourself. Now, I usually use the green Nifty Knitter Loom to make typical hats for me. But for this one, I believe I end up using the yellow one, which I thought was really surprising. It actually worked better for the idea that I wanted to do. You're going to need at least 3 stitch markers. These are the same things I always use, whatever you use to kind of mark your place. Scissors, crochet hook, the regular hook that comes with it, all the typical stuff, and obviously the yarn. This is exactly the same yarn I used to make the hat. I actually got it from my local dollar store, and it's called Rabbit. So I'm going to hold that up so you can see. And on the back, it is a 50 gram, 71 yards of it. And I think I end up using about all of it, give or take, or pretty close to it. So in order to do this hat, you need to do the drawstring cast on. So go ahead and anchor your yarn there. Then take the string that's going to be able to go all the way around. And don't worry about this tail, we can cut it off later. It's just, it doesn't actually need to be this long. So I'm actually going to change that. I don't know why it's so long. Because you're going to be drawstringing this closed, so you don't really need a huge one. Just enough of a tail that you can pull later. Okay, so again, I'm going to re-anchor this on there, pull it tight. Doesn't have to be too snug, just enough so that it won't come off. Okay, I feel like I'm out of the loop of doing videos even though I just did one. Okay, I'm going to quickly review how to do the drawstring cast on. I do have a video on YouTube already about it, so if you need to, go check that one out, even though I'm going to kind of give you a little quick flashback, I guess. You're going to take the yarn and you're going to work your way back and forth between the pegs. And by that I mean you're working behind a peg and then in front of the peg. Behind and then front, behind and front, behind and front. Oops. Okay, you're working your way back and forth. So go ahead and do that. Because sometimes doing this is easier just to have it on its side when you're doing it, and that's all I'm doing. I know you can't see it. I apologize that my scenery for doing videos isn't that great. I'm just in an extra room that we had, actually our bedroom, because it's the easiest place for me to have my camera and stuff set up. But I look at it, people are looking for the video, they're not looking for a razzle-dazzle kind of thing. Okay, so I'm going back and forth, I'm getting back to the beginning. Like I said, that's all it's going to look like when you get to the end. Okay, now just make sure when you get closer to the end, what you're going to end up doing, is bringing the yarn in front. So let me make sure. And the best thing to do is to check and make sure, like I always check to try to make sure I'm not messing it up, because I have done that before. And then you're just going to lay it in the strand in front, and all you're going to do is knit over where there's 2 strands. Okay, and it's a little tricky because you got to hold it in place, but this, I really enjoy this cast on, it works really well, and this is going to be like the top of the hat, so. And I think kept it as a pretty simple design. I just basically knitted, or E-wrapped I should say. I didn't do anything too fancy with it. You might be able to try adding different things, but this was just one of those ideas I had one night, and I'm like, hey, if you can make a hat for $1, that's pretty good. So, I'm sure you can find, oops, I just lost a pig. I lost a pig. That kind of irks me. Alright, so let's see. That's going to mess me up. Okay, that's in front. So that was probably behind. So let me fix that. Okay. Luckily I was able to see which way it should go. Be very careful of that too. Depending on how often you use your looms, it does seem like after a while the pegs pop out easier, which gets really annoying sometimes. Because you'll be working right along and then a peg will pop out and you don't understand why, and you get mad. That's the one thing I do like about my DA Looms one. The way the pegs are in there for the Infinity 2 loom, they really can't pop out unless you probably break them. But for people, these looms are a little cheaper, but it's all I'm doing, just as I'm getting to the end, is I'm just knitting over wherever there are 2 strands on there. It's just hard to show the camera what I'm doing exactly. And then all you're going to do after this is you're simply going to work your way around in your normal knitting manner. And then what's going to happen, okay, so you went around, push all those down so they're at the bottom, and then you're just going to simply E-wrap it like you normally do for quite a ways, I believe, in order to be able to close this off. What the drawstring does, if you haven't seen my other video, is going to close off the space in here. So go ahead and E-wrap around. And then just simply knit over. I mean, you could change this up. Like, I just did one strand. You could do a tighter stitch for it being around. You know, taking 1 over 2, make it tighter if you want. But I just kind of kept it as simple as possible. And basically, you're going to keep E-wrapping around till you get to about the point where you can close off the circle from not showing. And then we start working on the actual pad itself. So what I'm going to do is I'm simply E-wrapping. I'm just wrapping them. I'm going to knit over. So I'm going to do that for a few rows, and then I'll come back and we'll be to the point where we can close this off and begin the actual hat. So I've been working on the drawstring part. I've went around about 8 times, and I'm getting ready to see if I've went down enough to close this off. So what you do is, if you have the yarn that you had on here, take it off and kind of work it down through so it's down here. And then all you're going to do is just, I call it the cool effect, is you grab the extra string and you just pull it. And what that will do is close off the middle. And this will give you an idea too, and you can lay it on your lap, it's a little easier, if you need to go farther. As you can see, I'm still working it. Sometimes I'll be like, okay, yeah, like right now I can't go any further, so that means I need to do another couple rounds, and then I can keep pulling on this until I get this whole thing closed off. So it's probably another couple rows, and like I said, I'm just E-wrapping around. You can try doing a different stitch. You know, you don't have to do it exactly the way I do it. I try to do videos so that you have the idea, and then, excuse me, and then you can go from there. So I'm going to go around a couple more times till I can get this fully closed off, and then I'll show you how I keep it closed, and then we'll move on to the next part. Okay, it took probably about 11 to 12 rows to get it to close off. It's a little hole, but what we're going to do is you're going to have this excess tail. I mean, obviously very long because you pulled this closed to fill in this gap. So what you're going to do is you're going to try to hide that little hole. So grab yourself a crochet hook. And what you're going to try to figure out too is that this is going to be the inside of the hat. So when you actually tie off, you're probably going to want to make sure you tie off on this side so that you don't have it sticking out, excuse me, on your head. So you're just going to work yourself for the back as close to that loop as you can, and grab that extra straggler and pull it through the other side. Give it a little tug. And again, I have a video about drawstring cast on, which might be easier to watch because I'm using a smaller loom, so it's easier for you to see exactly what I'm doing. A bigger loom, I have to set it down sometimes in order to see what I'm doing. But I'm just working it back and forth for a minute to kind of help close off that hole. Okay, so see, as you can see, it's starting to close off. So that's all I'm doing for a little bit before I actually tie it off. And then you'll be able to cut the strand so you don't have it so big. So I'm just kind of working it from one side of the loom back through to the other. It's a little tricky too when it's the... Okay. Like I said, this is going to be the top of the hat, so we want to make sure that I work it back through the other side when I go to tie it off. Okay. So working on the side that's going to be the inside, you're going to find you're going to loop, or excuse me, take your crochet hook and go next to it someplace that you can kind of create a knot. So I'm going underneath some of what I have, grabbing that strand, and I lost it, grabbing that strand and pulling it. Okay, seriously not cooperating today. Okay, grabbing that strand to pull it through. If it will cooperate, I gotta put this down for a second, hang on. Okay, so we went through next to it in a couple of loops. Put your crochet hook through, there we go. And you're basically trying to create a loop that you can bring the excess string through and basically create a knot. Okay, so all I did was create a knot. So this, when you push on it, see, it won't open up. I do that a couple times. I'm obsessive about how many knots I usually do, just because you worked really hard on something you don't want it to come through. So I'm just working the crochet hook through one of those so I can create a loop to bring the other strand through and then I just pull it tight so it creates that knot. Like I said, you can kind of push against it and realize, okay, that's not gonna come undone. Okay, and then once you're done, just go ahead and cut yourself the excess off. Okay, so now, as you can tell, our drawstring close off is done. So now what you're going to be working on is the actual base of the hat. Now what's tricky, okay, is that it's going to be different for people because it depends on the size of your head. So it's hard for me to say, okay, do it so many rows or something, because really it depends on your head, as I just said. So you kind of can look at mine, this is my head, but I tried to figure out if I could count when I started doing different things on it. Basically I'm doing the same single knit till I probably get about here, which is probably down 5 or 6 inches, because right about here you see a bigger hole, which again is not that noticeable on your head. This is where I start doing a different technique for a few rows, because what you want to create is the fact that the back to be slouchier than the top. And the reason this is the top is the way I casted it off, and the reason this is the bottom is the same reason. But I don't want to get ahead of ourselves. So what you want to kind of do now, before you get too far ahead and forget to, is look at your loom and you want to divide it in half. You want one side to be considered the front, or the front of your head kind of art, and one for the back. And you want to be able to divide it in half, because there's going to be a step coming up where we only work on one side for a few rows. So that's why I get, excuse me, the stitch markers that kind of come apart. And what I'm going to do is I look here and I'm like, okay, I'm going to put a loop on this peg and secure that, because that's going to help break off the path. Because when you're working on one side, you don't want to go too far. And I don't really necessarily count, I just kind of look to see what's kind of parallel to it. And then I grab another stitch marker, and like I said, I kind of eyeball it, going, okay, if I follow this line, and I just kind of put it on one of the ones over here. There's really no method to my madness, it's just, so in a sense, you kind of have it divided up. Of course, I used a yellow one on this side, so it's going to be a little hard to see, but there's the stitch marker. And if you want, you can count, go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, and then I hit that one. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19. So I mean, it's a little off, because let me see, one's here and one's here, which is kind of a little off. So you can actually take this one and move it up one. If you're looking where that is, you kind of want it to be as close to around it as you can. So just kind of put your fingers in and be like, okay, is that lining up? Do I need to move it down one? But it's actually not too bad, I guess, looking at it this way. So this is where they two are. So wherever you want to kind of break it up, I mean, like I said, you want one side, you're going to be working on one side later, it's going to be the back of the hat, one side is going to be the top of the hat. So I just put them in now so I don't forget. The other thing you can do is grab another random one, and basically decide which side is going to be your front and your back. So I'll be like, okay, I'm going to make, I'm looking at it going, okay, which side do I want to make the front, which side do I want to make the back? So I'm going to make this side the front, just for giggles, I guess. So this is my front. So therefore, this way, when you're loom knitting the rest of this, because you're just going to be doing the regular E-wrap for a few more rows, but when we get to the other technique, you already have it marked off which side is your back, which side is your front. So the stitch marker I put here is just for me to remember that this is going to be the front of my hat. So I'm not going to be doing as much to this right now, or as much to this as I am the back. The back gets more work than the front. But right now all you're going to do is you're going to keep E-wrapping around until you get it down the width you want. And I wish I could tell you how many rows, but it's a little hard to tell. Probably did, and I think I did a little tight knit stitch too in there a little bit, but it really depends on what stitches you want to do. I just kept it more like an E-wrap thing. So what you're going to do now is just go ahead and just keep E-wrapping on whatever stitch you're doing. Probably I would say to get about, I'm trying to think, the loom goes this way, I would get to about here, kind of thing, about 4 or 5 inches past the loom for now, and then we'll come back and we'll go from there. Okay, I know I said to work till I got so many inches past the loom, but like I realized too, it's going to change depending on the head you're doing. So I want to show the next other steps. So basically, the best thing to do is to practice this with the yarn to get an idea of how far down you need to go for your head. So we're going to ignore what I said before about 3 or 4 inches, and right now we're looking at it, and there's a little give to it right now. And of course when it goes on your head, there's going to be give. Hell, if you want, you can put it on now and see it gives. So it's going to have a little give to it anyway. So I don't think I went down as far as I said to go down. So what I'm going to show you is the next step. So what you're going to do is you're going to do a drawstring cast on, and then you're going to E-wrap around the whole loom for probably what you feel is going to be best for your head. Maybe an inch or two, could be a little more. Like I said, do a practice one first, and that'll give you an idea. But try to practice in the same kind of yarn you're going to use for the permanent one. Now you can what they call Frogger project, which means so you can always use, we'll say, the yarn that you want to use and test it out. If it doesn't work, you can take it apart and start over. So don't feel like when you use what I call practice yarn that you're not going to be able to use it again. You are. It's just the best thing I always say is you need to practice first to get it, obviously down right. I don't do patterns. I try to do it on my own. I very rarely do patterns. I'm slowly getting into making some, but it's not really my thing. But anyhow, so say you already have this down to where you feel you need it to be to have enough give to go on your head. Excuse me. What you're going to do now is you're going to look to see where you marked off the front. We're going to use this as the front where I pegged it, or wherever you marked it. And we're looking at the pegs that we put on each side. What we're going to work on now is the back of the hat. To give it that little more looser feel, we're just going to work our way from this marker all the way around until we get to that marker. We're going to just go back and forth, you can see it, from this side to this side for a few rows, because that's going to give it that feel of being a little bigger. So we're just going to do that, and all you're going to do is just work your way back and forth. I mean, you work here, you go around, I'm just doing E-wrap or whatever stitch it is that you decided you would like to try with this hat. So I'm working my way, E-wrapping it around until I get to that other stitch marker that I had placed. Okay. So here it is wrapped. I'm only concerned about this side. I'm only concerned about the back of the hat. So I had that like that, and then, did I bring in? There it is, okay. Then you take your hook and you just obviously knit it over. And you're going to work this probably, I think with this I did about 4 or 5 rows. Because you basically want the back to have just a little more length than the front. So that's all I'm creating here is that effect. And I will take this completely off the loom so you can see. Who knows, maybe doing it like this might even look better than the one I did. It might even be a little smaller and be something you prefer better. It's just something to play around with. That's what I like about the dollar store around me that has these little skeins of yarn for like $1, because they're great just for little projects like this. Okay, so we went 1 row. Okay. Now find where your yarn is, and you're going to work your way back. But since this is the peg you start with, you're not wrapping that one. Excuse me, I gotta get this one not being tight. You're just basically wrapping the ones next to it. So you skip the peg that's on, you just wrap back this way, and wrap your way back to that other peg. Okay. Now this will create that little bit of a hole gap I showed you before, but I'm going to try to do something and see if that helps it, that I might not have done on that hat. So we're doing our 5 rows, get back to that peg, wrap it, and then just knit over that section. As I think I did about 5 times. Basically, again, practice it and see how many rows you want to do it. This is basically to give you the idea of how I did something, and then obviously you can modify it. I just want to give you the idea that, hey, this is something you can do, go for it. So I'm working back and forth. This is like row 2, so we're going to do a couple more rows of these. And then what you're going to do is you're going to end up going all the way back around the whole loom. And then I'll show you how I cast it off. Because those are the main parts of how I do it. The way I cast it off and working on 1/2 of the hat. But I'm sure this will look great with other stitches, so you might even want to get like a, use a thin yarn. Make sure it's thin enough. Like I said, this one isn't that thick. You want it kind of thin enough so that if you decide you want to try a different stitch to give it a different look, it'll kind of show, but it won't be really thick like, we'll say, Red Heart yarn. If the thick, the normal, I guess, yarn you always use. I lost my string. You want to make sure it's something that will kind of, be light and airy, because this kind of hat I like for just those days where it's a little cool, but not cold, where you need a thick hat. So we're doing row 3 back and forth. I know you can't see what I'm doing. I'm just wrapping it till I get back to the other side, the stitch marker again. That's why it's good to have some indication, unless you're good at remembering it. I will forget, so I have to mark it somehow so that I know. and then I knit over. And this is 3 times. I mean, it's just going to help create almost like a pouch on one side, and I'll show you what I mean in a minute, and that'll give you an idea. Because you just want the back side to have that little, like a pouchy feel, I guess. So I'm going to do a couple more rows of this, and then I will come back and show you the next step. What I've done is I went probably 4 or 5 or 6 rows, and if you look, because this is the part that's going to be the top, it kind of has that little bit of a pouchy kind of feel on one side. I mean, I'll do it on either side, but I mean, that's what you kind of want, is that little pouchy type feel. Now what you're going to do, like I said, it's going to vary how far down you go depending on your head, but this is just the basic steps that are involved so that you can modify it to your own needs. Now what you're going to do now is before, because if you look, you can kind of see there's going to be a hole here. There's a gap there, and there's a gap up here. So what you're going to do, I believe this will work, is you're going to take the pegs and switch them around. So you're going to bring, this peg, if you're able to. It's going to be a little tight, and you're going to move it, and switch these pegs around. Okay? So all I did is I moved this peg to there, and now I'm taking the peg that was on here and moving it to there. What that should do is help tie off that hole a little bit when you go back around. And then go to the other side and do the same thing. So when you're looking at these two pegs, you want to switch these two so that helps close off the gap. It may not be perfect, but it will help. I'm trying to find the loop that was just on that other one. Like I said, you don't want the stitches to be too tight, otherwise you won't be able to switch it. So that's all I'm doing is switching it to kind of hopefully close off that hole a little bit. And then go ahead and E-wrap around the whole loom. Oops. And then this, soon I'll show you how we do the actual casting off. So you might do this for maybe 1 or 2 rows, and then you're going to cast it off. And how you cast off is going to be different again, depending on whether you're working on the front of the hat or the back of the hat. That's why I had that stitch marker in the front, so that I can remember where the front and the back is. Because what I do is I do the crocheting in between, and what I do is I actually put 3 loops on this one so that I can start it back where it was. I'm taking both bottom loops over the top. Then go ahead and knit over all the pegs. It may not work to close it off, but what you can always do later is take, if you have any extra of this string, and kind of tie off the hole a little bit. Again, it shouldn't be that noticeable once it's on your head, probably unless you're blonde or something. I mean, I'm brown hair, so stuff doesn't notice. This color yarn isn't as noticeable in my hair when there's a mistake. If I used a brighter yarn, then it would be noticeable, and I would try to fix it. And you're going to decide to say at least do 2 rows around before we get ready to cast this off, or before I show you how to cast it off. And again, this is just an idea. It's kind of like the template, and then you kind of modify what you need it to be for you. But I also thought this would be a cool hat to like go through and put a flower on, like a very simple flower in the front. But I haven't perfected what I want to put on mine as of right now. And I have other yarns I want to try this with too that are lighter and brighter to see how they work. So all I'm doing is finishing my knitting around, and I would go around 1 more time at least. And you may find yourself wanting to go around even more. You might go around 2 times. You might go around 3 times, whatever you decide to do. I'm just doing it twice around, and then I'll show you how I cast it off. And because you want to make sure, like if you're only using a little ball yarn, you want to give yourself plenty to be casting off with. You don't want to be stuck not having enough to cast off in the same color of the yarn. So I mean, I could go around probably a couple more times and still have enough to cast off, but it's always one of those philosophies, better safe than sorry, especially if it's the only color you have of that. So we're going to go through and we're just going to E-wrap 1 more time, or knit, I mean whatever you decide to do. If you want to purl it, if you want to do the knit, if you want to do the E-wrapping of it, if you want to try doing a tight stitch, a chunky stitch, whatever stitch you want to do for the hat. You can probably do it under the same idea that we're doing here. But just make sure you have enough of the yarn. So if you're going to do a different stitch, that requires you going around more times before you knit over, then probably get yourself 2 things of yarn if they're little like this one that you can tie together and use, because you don't want to be at the very end and not be able to finish it up. Okay, we'll be ready to cast off in a couple minutes. I'm just going to go through, knit this over. And so this may not work right now for me because I know I have to do more of the middle, but like I said, it depends on how far or how big you want it on your head anyway. So before you do the one side of working like the back to make it pouchier, you may go down a little further doing the regular knitting to have it come down further on you. But we'll see how this looks when it's done. Sometimes you just never know unless you try. Okay, we're almost back to the beginning, and then we will cast off. Now the difference in casting off means that the front of the hat is going to be only 2, well, I gotta look at it again. The back has 3 loops in between. The front, I believe, has 2 or 1. I gotta check the other one to see if I can tell again. Because what I want is I want the front, because this part's pretty loose, so this is the back. This probably has, I would say, I think it has like 3 chains in between. The front looks like it has maybe 2 in between. And you can see that what it does is it makes this side tighter than this side. So when I put it on, that's why I look to see which side just looks like it's together tighter, and this becomes the front and this becomes the back when I put it on my head. So get yourself a crochet hook, and you're going to be kind of working, let's see, doesn't matter if those are pushed down, I don't know why I'm pushing them down. Okay, the first thing is, what I like to do before I cast off is just unravel a lot of the yarn. You don't want to be fighting with this at the last minute because it doesn't want to come off. So I'm just unraveling some of it now so that it gives me a good chunk to work with. Okay, now what you're going to do is you're putting loops in between. So I'm looking to see which side I'm working on first. This is my front peg, so I'm working actually on the going around the back first. The back side is going to have 3 chains in between each peg before you lift up the next, because you want it to be looser in the back. So take your peg, the stitch marker you have here, take the peg up, or lift up the loop, put it on your crochet hook, and do 3 chains in between. So you're doing 1, 2, 3. Okay, and then once you, oops, get back here. So we got 3 on there, and then we're going to pick up the next loop and put it on there. Okay, so we got the 2 loops, and then take the back over the front. I'm going to zoom in here if I can so you can see a little better. Okay, so what we're doing is we're going to do 1 chain, 2, 3, and then pick up the next loop. You're going to do this all the way around until you hit where your other stitch marker is. So you're going to do this all the way around until we hit back, where is it? Where to go? Till we get to this one over here. It's yellow so I couldn't see it. So that's what we're going to do. From where I am here, I'm going to work all the way around here, doing 3 chains in between until we hit, excuse me, this mark. And then we only do 2 in between. Or you can do 1 if you want it to be tighter. So I'm going to work on this side first, doing 3 chains in between, and then I'll meet you back getting ready to pick up the last one that goes with the stitch marker that I put there. And then we'll move on to what's going to be the front of the hat. Now I decided, like I said, I couldn't remember if I did 1 or 2 in between, but I'm only going to actually do 1 chain in between for the front, because I want to make sure it's a little tighter than the back, so it stays. So you're only going to do, you're only going to do 1 chain in between each peg. So that's all we're going to do before we cast off. So it's 1 chain, then pick up the next loop, put it on there, back from the front, excuse me, 1 chain, grabbing the loop, putting it on there, and you're going to do this all the way back to the beginning, and hopefully your loops will cooperate better than mine are. Okay, so I'm just doing, like I said, 1 chain in between, So if you can't see how I'm doing that one chain, all I'm doing is this is my crochet hook, is I'm wrapping it around and then bringing it through that loop I have. Okay, so I'm going to keep going to do this all the way over to the end, and then I'll come back and show you how I finish it. I'm getting ready to pick up the last stitch on the ending part. As you can see, the hat's getting ready to kind of bounce down. So I'm just doing my last chain in between, and my last picking up of the last loop to bring it over. Okay, so what do you do when you have it at this point where you have that last loop? Like I said, this isn't going to be as well, and there's still the gap, which we can fix that later. So what I'm going to do is, even though you got that there, you're going to do one more chain, and then what you're going to do is go back over to this part and go through another loop that you had already did before. So this kind of helps secure it more together. So it doesn't even matter if it's a bigger one or not. You just want to be able to do that one more time to kind of connect the pieces a little more. And then what you can do is cut yourself a strand to work with, and then you're going to pull that whole strand through that loop. This will help to secure it a little bit. And then what you're going to do is just kind of work your way, creating as much of a, as a hole you can to be able to make a knot, just to keep it from falling off, basically. As you can see, that's going to be pretty tight. Like I said, there is still gaps, even though we switched that around. You could, if you've got a long enough tail, kind of work your way back and make it smaller, but it isn't too bad. This is a lot smaller than what I did, so I'm not sure how it's going to look. But again, this was doing a little different. You're going to need to make the base a little bigger for yourself in order to have it do what you exactly want. Again, it depends on the head, so that's why I don't... Okay, I'm going to cut that string. Okay, and let's see what we got here. Alright, this is the hat all the way off, and as you can tell, just to give you a variation, these are the two hats. One's a lot shorter than the other, so let's see how this one actually fits. This is just the idea. You're going to definitely need to make the base part bigger probably for yourself. But this is the side we crocheted 3, a lot looser than this side, so this is going to be your front. And there it goes. Now this is more like a beanie actually, so maybe we found something new. So this is like not giving you that pouch you want in the back to make it a slouchy hat, but this almost kind of works if you want something that's a little more, you know, beanie-ish and not as in the back. Basically, what you need to do is you do the drawstring cast on, and then as you're going regularly around before you start working just on the back, you're going to want to go down a little further if you want to create that pouch. As you can see, this one does not have a pouch. It's a little closer to the head because I didn't do it as far down because I just wanted to show you how to do it. So what you want is you definitely want it to be, excuse me, but I do like doing the one chain in between for the top. I feel it's a little better than what I did here. So again, let me just show you the comparison. This is the one I had made before. So and this has that little pouch kind of at the bottom. So what you definitely want to do, is do your drawstring cast on, and then go around more if you want it to be a little more slouchy in the back. Go down a few more inches before you start working just the one side. So again, if you had your loom, drawstring cast on, going all the way around the loom, a little longer than I showed you. Again, I was shortening the tutorial to show you the steps, but it does change depending on your head. So you might go down a little further before you start working 1/2 for the back, and then working all the way around and casting off. But I would say that for me, I like doing the one chain in between in the front and the 3 for in the back, but you may find that maybe you need 2 in the front and still 3 in the back, or 4, or whatever. This is just the basics. Go ahead and play around with it. This is just the idea of how you did it. And like I said, even with this one, the new one we did, oh, excuse me, my nose is itchy. There's still like a little bit of a gap. So if you want, make sure you save yourself a little yarn of this kind, because what you can always do is kind of go in there and like maybe tie it together with a little strand so it kind of closes it off. But no, this doesn't work too bad for kind of more like a beanie style if you want it. But I hope this helped, and I'm sorry for such a long video.